We're all so smart, which we are. I mean, you've spent a couple of days together, you know the level of intelligence in this industry. If we're all working so hard, he's waving. Paddy, Sam, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Too loud? Is that me or the... Don't stand next to the speaker. We're all so smart, like quite seriously, incredibly smart industry, we're all working so hard. You know how hard you work in DevSecOps, in cybersecurity. Why is everything so awful, is the question I have. At the end of this, I expect you'll have questions as well. I'll be available afterwards. I'm sticking around for at least a couple of hours. My contact details will be at the end. All references will be blogged. I was hoping to do that in advance. I will do that over this weekend. Of course, it's being recorded and so on. All media that I show is owned as copyright. If it's uncredited like this, it's probably, unless I've forgotten, it's probably Pixabay, the wonderful online website. So we've had a lot of technical talks over the last couple of days. This is something different. This talk is more of an investigation wall. You're familiar with the idea, you've seen the detective dramas, the crime dramas. The detective, the investigator, has a lot of ideas, clip-ins, photographs, and long pieces of string, sometimes between them, trying to figure out the connection, trying to figure out the mystery. Like I say, why does everything feel so awful? You are, unfortunately, some of you are going home, none of you want to stay and listen to me all weekend. So this is a kind of part of that investigation wall, a few ideas. Some long connections stringing together, some connections I'll explain really quickly. And especially in this talk, as opposed to some of the great technical talks we've had, some seedlings. I've got half an idea, quarter of an idea, I'm not sure if it works, I'm not sure if it makes sense, I'm interested in what you think. The way to start figuring out this mystery, I've basically stolen some slides from John Kindervag, field CTO of Palo Alto, from his talk, Win the Cyber War with Zero Trust. Now, if you look at that talk, it describes the 4 levels of war, the 4 levels in which you think. Grand strategy, tactics, operations. As you see there, sort of overall, it's the ultimate goal, the big idea, the strategy of how you're going to achieve your ultimate goal, which is usually win the war, something like World War II. Tactics and operations, the things you use and the way you use them. With all due respect to the technical, tactical presenters we've had, and you tend to have in other cybersecurity and developer-orientated presentations, those are very tactical ways of thinking. They are very tactical solutions. I think what we're missing in this industry is strategy, is thinking at that strategic level. Now, I'm not sure about Zero Trust, but I like from this talk that he thinks about cybersecurity at a strategic level. He thinks about the big idea. How do we make the whole thing work? Now, to oversimplify incredibly quickly, the tactics we have in this industry for everything you do, system admin, being a developer, working in security operations, what do you do at the tactical level in your job? I would say the way you are good at your job, the way you are better at the job, the way you're ranked against everybody else, is your individual level of skill. Something you hear in this industry a lot, which means different things to different people, is passion. It's all about long hours, you and your laptop. You're better than someone else because you spend longer doing it. You're better than someone else because you are better. That's it. You know more code. You can code faster. It's your individual level of skill and aptitude. Now, especially for the DevSecCon remix of this talk, to stretch an analogy may be too far. I'm interested in your feedback afterwards. Your processes, your automation as well, I would say is the same thing. It's about making your process absolutely as hard as it can be, absolutely as fast as it can be, the best automated process, the best Docker container, the best application standing on its own. So that is our tactical and therefore strategic approach to cybersecurity. Where has that got us? When I started doing versions of this talk 3 months ago, data breach statistics according to Breach Level Index, since 2013, that's almost 10 billion data records stolen. Looked at the website again a week or so ago, we're just over 14.5 billion records stolen. You look at a blog post by Rapid7 around April of this year, looking by CVEs. It's not quite exponential, but just more and more CVEs, and they described it as being by the heavy hitters, the same companies, the same kind of CVEs over and over again. You look at the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report for 2018, so risks to civilization as a whole. Up there in the top right, you've got climate change, you've got global weather events, so thousands of years effect on nature represents the cross-reference of likelihood to impact at the top right. Cybersecurity, we've been around like 40, 50 years. We're there. So that's where head tactics have got us. Well done, everyone. So why? So I'll hide behind the podium when I say that. So, and this reminds me of something, that tactical approach. How can I be the best cybersecurity practitioner? It reminds me of this.
They're at about 54, 55 feet. So we're going to work through the same drill, get into the same position. And from here, we're hitting the putt so solid. That's the biggest difference that I've seen.
Does this feel like your day job? The way we practice, like golf, it's you, your tool, it's the static environment. Be the best golfer you can be. When you play golf, it's essentially this, except there's some people watching. Your teammates are encouraging you but not helping. The field still stays static. Your teammates don't help you, the hole doesn't move. Your adversaries, the opposing team or the opposing player, is watching. And then they go and try to be the best golfer they can be. They're not going to move the hole. They're not going to try and start a weather storm. They're not going to attack you. They're not going to throw a golf ball at you. They're not going to throw a club at you, and so on. So doing like that is fine. You might be asking what's wrong with golf. There's nothing wrong with golf. There's no problem for training for golf if you're going to play golf. You look that happy if you've trained for golf and you play golf. And I think we've got golf-like tactics. It's be the best cybersecurity practitioner I can be, which has somehow then created like an emergent strategy of be the best cybersecurity practitioner I can be. But I think we're trying to play conceptually the wrong sport. Now, if anybody wants to stick around, the weekend long version of this presentation goes into a lot about analogical thinking and different comparisons and so on. But to justify that, I'll just use one example, TRIZ, which is an acronym for whatever's Russian for the theory of inventive problem solving. Invented in the 1950s by an inventor/science fiction author in Soviet Russia, in, unfortunately, I think, Stalin's gulags, where he looked at inventions and the problems they solved and the characteristics of those problems, and then he looked at the patterns in the solutions. So sort of conceptually, the kind of solution to solve a conceptual problem. And he looked with a sufficient level of abstraction, you can use other people's conceptual solutions to solve your problem. If someone needs twice as much power from a power source, but can't have that power source be twice as heavy, people will have solved that in other engineering disciplines. So you just look at the overall conceptual method they used, and then you use it yourself. Now, TRIZ is really complicated, to be honest. I've done a little bit of reading in the Wikipedia page. There's like 40 principles of TRIZ. It looks really interesting. I really like the idea of it as an engineering shortcut. But I also like the overall analogy. You've got your problem, traditional approach. You just keep thinking about your problem in your context, and you get to a solution. Instead, look at the conceptual problems in the world that are like yours. Look at how people have solved those problems. Stop trying to bang your head through that wall. And overall, to be honest, I don't know if it's age. I don't know if it's the people I know in the industry. I think as an industry as a whole, we're what's called in, I think, management consultancy, business management, a strategic inflection point. We either keep trying to do what we're doing harder and harder and profit declines, or you change the way you work and things get better. But the way you're doing it just won't work anymore because the situation you're in has changed. Again, literally like I've read a couple of articles on a Wikipedia page. I think we need to jump from one S-curve to another. We put more and more effort and we get less and less out of it. We need a different way of thinking in this industry. Because if we were playing golf, we would look like that. It's a bit of an oversimplification. There's nuance to this argument, but in cybersecurity, we look like this. And also, again, stretching the analogy, our applications look like this. Our software looks like this. Our infrastructure looks like this. It's out on its own. Right, we've made you as hard as possible. That's it. Be the best golfer you can be independently. That's not the environment we're in. So think about what your processes go under. Think about what your infrastructure, the context your infrastructure is in, but also think about your day jobs. Think about the calls you've taken today, what was happening earlier this week, the size of your inbox you're looking forward to either on Saturday morning or Monday morning. Think about your colleagues, think about your managers. Also, think about your adversaries. I think your situation, our situation, looks, sounds, and feels much more like this.
Come on, defense! Come on! Come on! Hey, party just began, baby! Hurry up, hurry up! Hurry up!
Gun flex right stack, 394 Dragon Smoke. Kill turbo sucker right.
Hurry up!
Gun flex right stack, 394 Dragon Smoke. Kill turbo sucker right.
The Patriots drop into coverage in this play. This is a form of a combination coverage.
You have to be kidding me. That is impossible.
We know our assignments. We know our alignments. We know our schemes.
You tired? You tired? Hurry up! The only thing matters is a win. That's it. However, whatever it takes.
Now, hopefully, I don't know, hopefully everybody's had a beer or two from downstairs, whatever. I realize this is a stretch, but also, I think I'm really onto something. Cybersecurity in general, the chaos of cybersecurity is a lot like American football, especially professional American football. Some of you, I don't know, with some of the lighting, it's hard to tell. Utterly incomprehensible from the outside. Talking to your relatives, talking to your non-technical friends. What we do makes conceptually absolutely no sense at all. You watch a game of American football, they all line up, they all wait, something happens, lots of people run into each other, I think maybe it's a fight, then they all stop. Then like entire teams seem to go off and come on. Makes absolutely no sense. Both are absolutely defined by their complexity. Also, something I don't have time to expand on, they're team games. The people you work with, the people you work against. It's something the way we practice completely misses. This is not golf. Also, it's fantastically highly specialized in both areas. That's why in American football, so many players go on and off the field. That's why the teams are so big. In our profession, it's the same way. There's specialization by situation and if you're attacking or defending with American football, whether your team has got the ball or not. Also, I mean, it's a fight over territory more so than any other sport, also more so than any other sport. Offensive and defensive playbooks, literally the same terminology that we use. I mean, talk about instant response playbooks and so on. Also the same terminology, the same philosophy, the same methodology as conflict, as a traditional military kinetic conflict. I think also there's a lot to learn from the military. There's a lot to learn from them with regard to logistics, strategy, tactics, and so on. I'll be bringing that in a little, especially wargaming, war studies, military modeling. There's a lot that we can learn from that and apply to our industry. So, what can we learn from football? And more importantly, who can we learn it from? As I said with Triz, find someone who's solved that problem already, who's best in this weird, complex situation. Now, an American football team is so big, You've got so many players, as I say, you've got an offense, the team that comes on the field when you've got the ball, the defense, the team that comes on the field when you don't. So I think we should pick a defense because we're defenders. I think we should learn from arguably the best defense. Therefore, I picked the Legion of Boom, the name of the Seattle Seahawks defense from 2011 to 2017. Mainly, it's cornerback Richard Sherman, free safety Earl Thomas, and strong safety Cam Chancellor. But the term kind of encompassed everyone over this time, because from 2012 to 2015, the whole point of an American football defense is stop your opponent scoring points. The best team for that for 4 years straight, which is an NFL record, was the Seattle Seahawks team. Now, unfortunately, the guy in the Packers shirt, I think he's downstairs. I know there's a damn Patriots fan around here somewhere, and I see a few knowing smiles around the crowd. So there's lots of other sports arguments. Glad to have them later. But for now, what can the Seahawks teach us? And the philosophy of their head coach, Pete Carroll. In your terms, the first lesson to take from him is what we would call shift left your conflict. For Pete Carroll, it's practice is everything. Part of his overall philosophy, win forever, which is literally what we want to do in cybersecurity, is practice is everything. Practice is as important as playing the game. Because the thing is, an NFL team is so big, these are all the players listed in white, that you've got a first string and second string team here, which means your second string defense can play your first string offense, and your second string offense can play your first string defense. And that means your second string squads can imitate whichever team you're due to play that Sunday. The idea of a scout team. So you're up against the Oakland Raiders on Sunday. You wear their shirt numbers, maybe even go as far as wearing their uniforms. You use their plays, you use their play calls, you use their formations, you try and imitate them. So by the time you're playing the Oakland Raiders on Sunday, this is not the first time you've played the Oakland Raiders. As well as studying film, you've played against them for the last 6 days. So it's just a continuation of what you do. And this brings me to a concept from military studies, a concept that this is literally the only slide on the internet that I'm hoping to make much more known, because it's from Matt Caffrey. It's called the Caffrey Triangle, who's been studying wargaming for like 30, 40 years. In military simulations, the problem they have with a military red force, someone running an exercise, is they'll be down here in this triangle, stimulate the game objectives. Completely, basically, we've bought some new tanks, make them look good, die on command, justify the $300 million we spent on an aircraft carrier. Penetration testers, cybersecurity practitioners, as part of a red team, as part of a red force in general, are arguably up here. Win at all costs, show all possible vulnerabilities, is the way penetration testers, is the way they try to be, when actually I think what we need is down here much more. Follow doctrine. Imitate your opponents, because your opponents are the ones you're going to face. It's not like American football, it's a single team, but you know it's a bunch of adversaries with a set of TTPs, techniques, tactics, procedures. That's who you're up against. You're not up against everything capable. You're not up against everyone capable of everything. Which reminds me, of course, of Adam Shostak, presentation he gave at BrewCon. And he said one of the many traps he listed with regard to threat modeling, which is essentially automated or manual practice against your systems, is doing it at the wrong time. From a Pete Carroll point of view, practice is like the game. You practice as hard, you hit each other as hard, you hit your own team as hard, and everybody gets better. You be the best player you can, so your teammate can be the best they can, so you have to get better, so they have to get better. In the same way with threat modeling, start right at the beginning. You do it, completely shift left. I mean, the presentation we had yesterday, Stuart showing, we can do this at speed and scale. It's not easy, but we can make such a difference if you shift left. And this is what everybody else does. This is how militaries train. This is how sports teams practice. It should naturally come to a set of people in that kind of conflict situation. Now, how do we define this kind of threat modeling? There's a good presentation you should watch from B-Sides Las Vegas earlier this year. MITRE's describing their attack framework, which stands for Adversarial Tactics, Techniques, and Common Knowledge, by Katie Nichols and John Wonder. And what they say there, what the attack framework gives you is the language to communicate TTPs and behaviors. You can describe how your opponents think and what they do conceptually. It's not just IOCs, it's not just IP addresses, it's not just hashes, it's actually the way they go against you. So it allows us to compare groups, it gives us a common language. Now, this is a long string across my investigation wall. This reminds me of the RAND report from 1991, the base of sand problem. Really interesting report. Basically, military modelers, war gamers, simulators, people as part of that billion-dollar industry looked at their entire industry that analyzed military affairs and basically said, we're all doing it wrong. Had the guts and the courage to say we're focusing on the wrong things, we're being too much focused on technology, too much on statistics, not enough on concepts. A great example from this, and I'm paraphrasing, is this footnote which says battle outcomes have historically borne no relationship to the raw force ratio. It's not just who's got the biggest army, it's not just who's got the most resources. What matters is the ratio of effective forces. It's getting the right people in the right place. So another long string, Jeremiah Grossman tweeted about this earlier this year, the Kenner Security Report. Of all vulnerabilities as a percentage, 2% are being exploited. Why try and fix 100% of issues? I mean, as per the talk yesterday, why try and fix all the issues when only 2% are vulnerable? You're wasting, I mean, it doesn't quite match proportionally, but 98% of your resource effectively. This blog from Jeremiah, All These Vulnerabilities Rarely Matter, is a nice explanation of the thinking behind that. So that's something we need to learn, is practice is everything, shift left. I mean, and we've got so many people to discuss threat modeling with today. I think that is so important, and there's an analogy. Sports teams do it, and the most successful sports teams do it most effectively. That's what we need to do. Second lesson, eliminate the big play. Again, I don't know, maybe I'll try and run a workshop on this next year. I would love to explain to you the single high cover 3 that the Seahawks use and the 4 deep zone underneath and so on, and that philosophy. But I think it's a bit late. There's food and drink waiting downstairs. We don't have time. So all you need to know is that's the offense. San Francisco 49ers with the ball. This is the Legion of Boom, Seattle Seahawks defense. Traditionally, defense is focused on defensive personnel. The biggest players closest to your opponents, it makes sense. They're the ones that are going to hit them every play. They're the ones that are going to hit them first. What the Seahawks did, as well as the linebackers, was really focus on the defensive backs. That's your last line of defense, especially the position that Pete Carroll played in college, the free safety. Now this, I mean, the colors match up more by accident than design. Reminds me of the NIST cybersecurity framework. You identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Now, to be blunt, I'm so old. I worked in security operations before it was called security operations. When it was this, identify, protect, dead. They've got in, oh, everything's over. Slowly but surely, we've realized, no, this is all as important, if not more important. It's the whole thing. You protect, so then you've got less to detect, but also you detect because your protection is not 100%. And we've finally learned to stop doing that. Which then look at American football. Again, you have a drive, you have a set of plays to gain yards, to try and get in a position to score a field goal or a touchdown, to score points. You lose the game if your opponents score more points. You don't lose the game if your opponents get more yards. The yards kind of don't matter. So you eliminate the big play. You stop your opponents scoring. It's not all about who gains yards. In the same way, looking at a presentation from Adrian Sanabria earlier this year, I think RSA 2018. The way we used to think was, that's it, you've been owned, and somehow magically all exploits take 1 millisecond from initial compromise to data exfiltration, when actually it's this, and whichever version of the cyber kill chain you want to use, whichever you prefer, whichever is suitable, there's all these steps your attacker needs to go through. There's all these opportunities to stop your attacker. And all those steps, which is illustrated by a useful concept from Sunil Yu, RSA Conference 2016, the Cyber Defense Matrix, where basically he's taken those 5 functions from the NIST cybersecurity framework and cross-referenced them with assets. And the important bit here is left and right of boom. Left is in green is pre-event structural awareness before you get exploited, but as important, post-event situational awareness. When you know you've been compromised, but you've only been in, it's only the initial compromise, the kill chain still has to be stepped through, you can do something about it. Now what Sunil Yu does is really interesting. I'm whizzing through it quickly. Taking all the asset classes, all the different types of assets, taking all the functions, basically what they do within that cybersecurity framework, and then looked at the enterprise security market segments and mapped them between the two, and you can see where there are and there aren't market segments. So what he did, and this is a couple of years old, so it's slightly out of date, he's taken all the security products and figured out what assets they protect, he's figured out what function they do, and cross-referenced the two. So you can basically see where products work, where they don't, where vendors are selling, where they're not. What's interesting, especially at here, DevSecCon, is that big white gap there. Now, unfortunately, I missed a couple of talks because I made a point of talking to the vendors, because actually there's a couple fit in there, but there will be a couple. I think Contrast and Sysdig, for example, arguably fit in that gap, but still, compared to the protect column, and if you ignore the protect column and use as cross-reference with detect, there's an opportunity there for us to do something. There's an opportunity there for either products or automation or bespoke scripting or whatever, because as I say, your adversary has to step through that entire kill chain. And detect, respond, recover, we've realized, is as important, because I've been saying cybersecurity, we don't work in cybersecurity anymore. None of you do. As per this slide, I've stolen from a semantic presentation because I don't pay for a Internet Security Foundation subscription. We all work in cyber resilience now. It's all about getting your systems back up to at least as good as the state they were. It's not just defend, 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 and hope they don't breach, because then we completely fall over. Are you going to let them in?
May I have your attention?
Oh.
May I have your attention, please? The public address and fire
Is it not a real alarm? Shall I just keep going and try it out? Just speak really loudly? Okay, no, go for it. If you... How long does this last for? Does it stop? It does stop. All right, no, then I'll keep going. He says...
The test is now complete.
I like that. That was, of course... Oh, I'll be talking to main reception later about that one. All right, no. Anyway, yes, so we work in cyber resilience. Really good blog post on this, which is now ingrained in all your... I like that way of waking up the audience, ingrained in all your memories. Nothing to sneeze at from NCSC, who've been publishing some really great stuff recently. If you want to understand the concept of cyber resilience, really good, and also analogies with health, and I'm into using analogies to explain their concepts. Also, we were in cyber resistance, we're now in cyber resilience. A really good blog post, not the name of the company, just the name of the blog, Black Swan Security, written by Phil Huggins. Especially these three parts interest me, because you go from good cyber risk decisions as part of resistance, part of both is situational awareness, but for resilience, for recovery, it's all about the speed of decision making, which again, let's look at some military analysis, some war studies, another long piece of string across the investigation wall. Of course, brings us to John Boyd, US Air Force pilot, 1960s, 1970s, I think 1950s, Korea and Vietnam. Came up with the concept of the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act. You start at the top, you start at the green arrow, you go around that loop, figure out your situation, figure out where you are, where your adversary is, you then decide what to do, where you then act, and the whole point is to go faster than your opponents. That's especially difficult in their situation because the attacker goes first, so their OODA loop starts by the time we start ours. So you've got to be faster than them. To me, there's two ways of doing that, because the way to win this kind of modern complex conflict is to outthink them faster than your adversary. One way, I mean, as discussed yesterday, is automation, is just go through your OODA loop so fast, you're vulnerable and not vulnerable before your opponent has even seen that a vulnerability is possible. Second way brings me to the last lesson to learn from the Seattle Seahawks. which reminds me of this from, I have a very connecty brain, reminds me of this quote from that Rand paper again. The evidence of history is that soft factors, command control processes, tactics and strategy are first-order determinants of both deterrence and war outcomes. Basically, who wins is your processes, your tactics, and your strategy compared to your adversaries' processes, tactics, and strategy, and their ability to execute on them. Which brings me back to the three main members of the Legion of Boom: Sherman, Thomas, Chancellor. So, Seahawks tackling video from 2015, a technique they've got called the shoulder punch. It's literally that. You knock someone over with your shoulder. You see Sherman coming in here. You can push the opposing quarterback out of bounds, but it's medically defined as a collision sport. Make the point. Have an impact on your adversary. Earl Thomas coming in from the right. Earl Thomas is 5'10", 200 pounds. But all that resource applied correctly. Rob Gronkowski, who takes longer to get up, is about 6'7", 270 pounds. But really, for the shoulder punch, I need to introduce you to number 31, Cam Bam Bam Chancellor.
Bam Bam, yeah. I actually got it tattooed on my shoulders. I call them my stamps. So when I hit you, it's a stamp I'm putting on you.
This is why. A breach is not an incident. It's not a fire. It's not a flood. It's not a natural disaster like an earthquake. A breach is an attack. An attack by an adversary with their own weaknesses. So, strong, safety, Cam Chancellor was well known, was infamous for what was described as setting the tone of the game. It's a collision sport. Like it or not, it's a violent sport. You hit your opponent legally as hard as you can. It's a shoulder punch. You set the tone for the game. You want to try and gain yards against us. This is what happens.
All day, baby! All day! All day!
All day. As his colleague Richard Sherman said, he damages people's souls. And that's what I think we've lost on defense. This brings me to David Bianco's pyramid of pain. From your adversaries, you take away their IP addresses, whatever. They'll attack you from some more. You spread their IP addresses at IOC against everyone else, fine. They'll just come at you from different IP addresses. Use something like the MITRE attack framework to understand and explain their TTPs. You figure out their TTPs, you share that with everyone. They now can't use that against all their targets. They have to rebuild the way they think, the way they act, and their entire tool chain from scratch. Now, the reason I think this is people entering cybersecurity fit into one of four Bartle's taxonomy of player types. The way people enjoy playing video games. Now, the socializers, the explorers, the achievers, we're not worried about. To me, it's the killers. In video game terminology, to be blunt, the arseholes, the trolls, the griefers. They like beating people, they like beating the game, they like messing up the game. Anyone with that mentality entering cybersecurity immediately goes red team, immediately becomes a pen tester, likes breaking stuff, likes breaking people, likes making developers look bad. They all go red team. We don't have that on blue team. I mean, Haroon Mir has been saying in keynotes for like the last 3 or 4 years, this is just one good example. But really, you watch any of them, we need more hackers on defense. And I think not only that hacker mentality, but that hacker attitude, that, to be blunt, that desire to hurt things, that desire to make your adversary look bad. I mean, as per Jan's talk yesterday, on defense, we, to be blunt, whinge all the time about users of the weakest link. Yet we look at our adversaries, we don't think about the humans on their side. It's all about technical competition. Yet there's humans on that side. And this, I was reminded of this watching the B-Sides Glasgow 2018 keynote earlier this year by Paul Median, where he reminded me, like Clifford Stoll, the cuckoo's egg, the first documented incident response exercise, I think. They're stole tapping keys on a modem line to slow the attacker down, but not to disconnect them, so they could slow them down, learn what they do, learn where they're coming from. Incident response started with deception. Now, you advocate deception, now people want to burn you at the stake. It's like, no, security by obscurity, we just don't do that. But I think there's loads of possibilities here. Samuel Shah's keynote from Black Hat Asia 2017, 7 Axioms of Security, Axiom 6. Best defense, be creative, give them something they're not expecting. Really good talk yesterday by it was Petco, yes. Darknets, honey tokens. Give them something not expecting, tripwires, the equivalent of a military minefield. That's what we need, that more malicious point of view. Also, Matt's talk yesterday, just on applications that fight back, and you want to speed up your OODA loop, if your application not only decides you're being attacked, but responds, and it's the same application, how fast is that? You're completely outpacing your adversary. And of course, with deception, they don't know that they've been outpaced or not. Really good talk from DevSecCon London earlier this year, Alex Davis, on just working together. This again, I mean, there's loads more to say. It's a team game. I mean, sort of Alex says, just work with others, share information, then everybody's working together. You've got all that knowledge, and also once your opponents make a mistake, everybody knows about it. I mean, this, I'm quoting from this talk from DevSecOps Munich earlier this year, but Richard Baitlick has been saying this since 2009. The way it has been is defender's dilemma. Once they've got in, we're dead, we're done. When actually, it should be the intruder's dilemma. Once they get detected once, everything gets burned. They have to start again. Loads of ideas. Gaslighting with honeypots and mirages from Kate Pierce, from Cisco. There's only slides for this, but it's really, I hope she gets a chance to present it somewhere where we can see it. It's genuinely, seriously Machiavellian. I mean, this is just, I just want to give you an idea of how many ideas there are we're not using, all the work that's got into this, and just all the possibilities there. Because we forget, this OODA loop is the way to win. Be faster than your opponent, but it's relative speed. You just have to be faster than them. So if you can slow them down, hit your opponent. I mean, you're all in DevSecOps for a reason. You're all in DevOps for a reason. You know how painful it used to be in like waterfall. You know the most painful thing you go through is change control. When everything slows down, force your adversaries to implement ITIL. Right, if you make one mistake with your code, your entire attack in 10 organizations just goes. Make it that bad when adversaries make a mistake. So many more ideas. Red Pill of Resilience, Kelly Shortridge, Countermeasure 2017, Chaos Monkey, part of the Simian Army from Netflix. If you've got a really resilient network, let out the Chaos Monkeys. Your opponent's C2, and I see Nick there, the C2 writer. Yeah, your C2 network has to be as resilient as the network you're attacking. Otherwise, just the terrain is such a mess. How does that C2 keep going? And like I say, all these references will be up. If you watch just one presentation that I've referred to, Sunil Yu, RSA 2017, Solving Cybersecurity in the Next 5 Years. Basically, you'll be pleased to hear from someone I'm really impressed with and really think you should watch. You'll see there at the bottom right, DevSecOps is the answer, because you've got control of the terrain. Your systems can be completely compromised, and you just turn them off and on again, and they all come back up virtually. Or with all those deception ideas, as we say, attack-aware applications, you divert the attacker to somewhere that doesn't matter, or somewhere where they keep attacking. So you learn their TTPs, you learn the MITRE attack framework to exchange their TTPs to everything else. It's, in sports terms, it's such a home field advantage. But as with this, I can't sell you like the OODA Loop 9000 to make this work. As per a slide I've stolen, hopefully it's okay, from Fraser, it's not a blinky box you can buy, install, and ignore. This is something you have to do, and it's something you have to keep doing. But it's a strategy. It's a concept. It's not a technical, tactical solution. It's a way of thinking. Should say a new way of thinking, but the stuff I've heard this weekend from various speakers. But you've done this before. You've adopted different concepts. You've adopted different cultures. This is something else I think we can all do, and I would argue something we have to do, because we're all really smart, we're all working really hard, and yet I've given a cybersecurity presentation, I've mentioned warfare, so I really should include a Sun Tzu quote. The way it feels is this quote: strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. But tactics without strategy, which it feels like we have in this industry right now, in places, and I've heard a lot of good stuff this weekend, it's the noise before defeat. And that noise before defeat phrase really sticks with me. So the lessons, use others, just from all sorts of different areas. Practice is everything, as we've discussed threat modeling. Eliminate the big play. It's okay to be breached as long as you're not fully compromised. React to that really quickly. Like we said, attack-aware applications. Out-hit your opponent. Just be, I don't know, cyber shoulder punch or something. Slow your opponents down. Make them so afraid they're going to mess up at every single action that their processes slow right down. Or maybe I'm wrong, some fun videos, some nice analogies, but this doesn't go anywhere. Maybe they don't know about DevSecOps. Or we can keep trying to play golf in a game of American football.
Yeah, golf. Football. Golf. No, football.
Let's watch both.
Miller Lite presents Full Contact Golf.
Yeah!
We're still on the first hole, Bob, and this is Davis teeing it up. Here's the drive. It is blocked! Brought to you by Miller Lite. If you can combine great taste and less filling, you can combine anything. Oh, he's got daylight going for the green. Here's the putt. There's the blitz. It's good! Yeah!
Oh, good beer.
Great taste, less filling. Can your beer do this?
Fun to watch, but sometimes it feels like we're that golfer with the American football players on the field. I think strategically we can do a lot better. But I've given you a glimpse to my investigation wall. It's definitely full there. I know there's some incredibly long pieces of string across it. I'm around for at least a couple of hours to discuss it. I welcome your feedback, as long as it's constructive, good or bad. I'm really interested in conceptually, I mean, as are you, being at DevSecCon, conceptually, how we can make a difference, how we can start winning the game we're in. So thank you very much for your time. Questions afterwards? You've got stuff to do? Are there any questions? Oh, we have a question. Oh, the microphone's on its way.
Any thoughts on legalizing commercial corporations' capability to respond with counterattack?
With?
Counterattack.
With counterattack. Oh. Within your own network, yes. Counterattacking is massive. There's a whole, the Somme, 1916, the German soccer team, 1966, and conceptually, there's all sorts of explanations and justifications and reasons why counterattacking, your opponent is at their the attacker is at their weakest, so you should counterattack them. However, the whole defend forward idea from the American DoD idea, and just strike back in general, attribution, I would argue quickly, attribution is not good enough. Actually, if you look at my name and strikeback server on Google, I've been arguing against like proper strike back for like over 2 decades. It's never been a good idea. So I think you make your own network so hostile and so weird, and so you make your attackers so unsure of what it is that you don't need to strike back, because attackers are just so afraid of wasting time or burning TTPs in your network, they just give up, or they get so slow, we just end up in some kind of normal fight where it's even. Whereas at the moment, it feels like we build a really strong castle and then just watch it slowly but surely get knocked down. Any more questions? No, and I'm glad we're saving the sports arguments for later. Thank you very much.